All right, now finally we're going to come to the last part about making the case and writing the case. And we're going to look at preparing the hook or preparing the introduction to your case. And it might seem a little bit strange that you're preparing the beginning of your case all the way at the end, but believe it or not, this is the best way to do it. So let's look at the introduction to your case. So when you're reading your case, you don't want to just jump straight into everything. You want to kind of ease the audience into it. When you're writing an essay, you have an introduction, right? When you're giving a speech, you have some kind of introduction to sort of introduce the audience to what you're going to be saying. And you do the same thing with your debate case. So you want to have some kind of introduction. And usually in debate, we call this the hook instead of the introduction. And the reason for that is because the introduction is supposed to sort of hook your audience, right? Get them hooked or get them interested. This as if they're, you want to hook them and pull them along with you as you go on this journey of exploring your side of the resolution. So we normally call this a hook, but it's basically the same thing as an introduction. So what should your introduction look like? Well, your introduction can be a variety of things. It can be a story. You can tell some kind of story that relates to your case. You can start off by giving a shocking statistic or fact. Maybe you could give some kind of statistic about how much free trade benefits the economy and causes prosperity or something like that. You can use quotes. Quotes are very often used in debate. In fact, almost everybody uses quotes. This seems more dignified and researched. In 2017, both of the people in the final round at Nationals, the National Championship tournament, they were using Ronald Reagan quotes. If you remember back to my practice round, or back to my example round that I had with my sister at the beginning of this course, I had a quote from Ron Paul. I started off my speech by saying, quote, "Don't do to other nations what we don't want happening to us," end quote, from Ron Paul. And that's how I started my speech. I just jumped straight into the quote. And that really got the audience interested as to like, wow, what's this person going to be saying? And this is a really interesting quote. So that can really come in handy. One important thing to note with these quotes and with really any intro, make sure it relates to the resolution, okay? This is supposed to relate to the resolution. This is a debate about the resolution. Also, make sure it actually relates to what you're saying. I've seen too many times people give this nice, beautiful quote at the beginning of their speech, and it's really a great quote, and it does relate to the resolution, but it has nothing to do with what they're saying in the rest of the case. And that's kind of pointless. So make sure it relates to the resolution, make sure it relates to your main arguments. Other things you can use as quotes. You can use real-world examples. I once told a story in my case about two criminals who were rehabilitated. I gave some kind of example. Analogies work really well. If you remember back to the example round we gave you, Lily, my sister, was using an analogy of two children, I believe, and how if you had to only choose one child, which one would you choose? I believe that's what she said. She used some kind of analogy, and those really work really well. They sort of simplify things for the judge, and the judge can sort of visualize things in their mind. I really love analogies. Anyway, you can pick from any one of these. If you need a quote, again, you can go to brainyquote.com, find some good quote, slap it in there. That'll work fine. After your quote or your example or your analogy or whatever, to end your introduction, you want to embed the resolution verbatim at the end of the hook. Okay, so after you have your analogy, or after I have my Ron Paul quote, I say the resolution, what the resolution is to support my side. So for example, when I was debating nationalism versus globalism, and I was the side of globalism, my hook was, "Don't do to other nations what we don't want happening to us, Ron Paul." And then to end it, I said, "It is because I agree with Ron Paul that I stand resolved globalism ought to be valued above nationalism." The resolved globalism ought to be valued above nationalism part, that was the resolution. You just want to put the resolution verbatim at the end of your introduction. Well, you want to put it verbatim if you're affirmative. If you're negative, you want to tweak the wording. Like if you're debating fair trade versus free trade and you're on the side of free trade, you don't want to say, "I stand resolved, fair trade ought to be valued above free trade," because you're really arguing the opposite thing. You're arguing for free trade. You can switch it around and you can say, "I stand resolved, free trade ought to be valued above fair trade." The point is you just want to put the resolution at the end of your introduction. And if we go back to the essay analogy again, that's sort of like the thesis in your essay. That's the thesis in your essay, except this is the thesis in your case. You put the resolution at the end of your introduction, and then you go into your definitions. So that's really how to make the introduction for your case. So this is step 9 in the handout. You can go ahead and start brainstorming for possible introductions you can use. And remember, this is just an outline, so you can go ahead and do that. And once you're done with that, you should have an outline for really everything in your case. So as a reminder, the order of your case should be as follows. You should have the hook or the introduction first. Then you have the resolution right at the end of the introduction. Then you have the definitions of maybe free trade or fair trade or whatever the terms in your resolution are. Then you have the value. then you have the criterion, then after that you have the three contentions, and then you have some kind of short conclusion at the end. And that's the layout of the case. And as another reminder, again, make sure each contention has a claim, a warrant, and an impact. So at this point, you now have an outline for your whole case. And this is a time when you can turn your outline into a case. So go ahead and just turn your outline into a case. And this is step 13 in the handout that I'm giving you. And one last note before I let you go, or there are a couple things. But first of all, don't give extraneous information as you're writing your case. So if what you're saying doesn't have any obvious impact on your main arguments, that's extraneous info. You shouldn't be saying it at all. Cut out the clutter. Just say what you need to get your point across. Also, remember you have two cases. You need two cases. So during this whole time, we've been focusing on one case. We've been focusing, I think I started off saying we were working on the, for example, I was working on the negative case for a free trade. But you also need to do this for the other side of the resolution. So hopefully as you've been doing this video, you've been following my instructions and you've been working on just one side of the resolution, the case for one side. Go ahead and do that. When you're all done with that, you need to work on the case for the other side. So maybe you could play these videos again, work on the case for the other side of the resolution, follow these exact same steps. Another note, your affirmative case should be about 6 minutes long when read out loud. Your negative case should be about 4 to 5 minutes. So you might want to, when you're all done, you might want to read your cases out loud, time them. If they're too long, you might need to cut some stuff, get them down to time, because they are strict about the time limits. But yeah, that's pretty much how you write your cases. So in the next section, we're going to move on from case writing, and we're going to look at some other things that you need to know for LD debate. But you've gotten to a very important point. The case is very important, and if you've made it this far, then you've done great. So I'll see you in the next video.